when reality suddenly slips by one beat, you do not need to look far to recognize it. It does not arrive through a metaphysical sign or a dramatic event capable of startling you. It always begins with something so small that if your mind is still too busy, you will treat it as if nothing happened. But deep in the body, in a layer you can hardly name, that a very thin crack has just opened. Everything around you remains still, but the feeling inside no longer clings to the same axis as before. You look at a familiar room, an old light, a cup of water that has been sitting there since morning, and for some reason they all carry a slightly different rhythm. It is not that the scene has changed, it is that you are no longer standing in your old position. This slight deviation does not bring fear like in the movies. It brings a strange stillness, a kind of quiet that makes you pause in the middle of whatever you are doing. The living rhythm that has been running steadily suddenly slows as if time has changed its speed. You do not need philosophy or spirituality to explain that this is not an ordinary moment. You feel it before you have a word for it. The shift lasts only a single breath, but its weight pulls along a series of realizations you were never clear enough to see before. Everything you've tried to ignore for months becomes unmistakably visible. The meaningless conversations, the repetitive habits, the old emotions you once forced yourself to endure all shift to a different angle, and you see their nature without having to try. The body registers it before the mind has time to react. You may feel your shoulders release, your breath slow down, your gaze becomes still as if you are observing your own life. This moment happens when you can no longer continue living under your old inertia. It is like an internal signal sent from the deepest part of you, the part that will never accept staying in a reality whose time has expired. You no longer blend into the familiar current. You step one beat outside, becoming both the person living in the story and the one watching it unfold. What you realize immediately is that this shift is not abnormal. It is logical. You have spent months unable to name the sense of discomfort, the loss of direction, or the simple feeling that things are no longer right. This moment of slipping by one beat is the final drop that marks the point where your inner process can no longer return to its old frequency. And when that happens, everything you once forced yourself to believe or endure begins to fall out of your hands. It is not that you are letting go. They fall away because they no longer match the new version forming inside you. A deep part of you knows that time is no longer measured in days or hours. It is measured in alignment, measured in frequency coherence. And you have slipped out of your old frequency long ago, only now you are quiet enough to feel it. This small shift opens many questions you once avoided. You realize you have lived too long inside a loop that no longer serves your expansion. You realize many choices that once held meaning are now only habits. You realize some relationships have reached the point of departure, not because anyone is wrong, but because the frequency between you and them no longer meets. You realize you have been trying to prove something for too long, and the exhaustion did not come from the actions themselves, but from living away from your own nature. The moment reality slips by one beat is actually the moment you align with yourself. And when that happens, every layer of noise you once used to cover your unease becomes meaningless. You no longer want to please anyone, no longer want to prove anything, no longer want to negotiate with your old versions. A straight line connecting thought, intuition, and body opens. Every layer of pretending falls away like dust. You see your truth so clearly that you cannot turn away from it. And from here, something very natural happens. You begin to no longer belong to the places where you once tried to belong. You no longer want to stay in conversations that make you shrink. You no longer accept energies that drain you. You stand in your truth without having to tense up. You do not need to speak any philosophy. As long as you breathe in your true rhythm, everything in your life will rearrange itself. This deviation does not destroy you. It decodes you. It is the first doorway into a timeline where you no longer try to live, you begin to live correctly. It is the invitation of the field asking you to look at reality, not with your eyes, but with your frequency. When you feel that shifted beat, the game changes. You no longer stand inside the old story. You stand exactly where your soul has been waiting for you to step into for a very long time. And from this moment on, nothing can return to its old state. You have stepped into the first phase of recalibrating your entire life. When stillness becomes a reminder, you do not hear any new sound appear, but you feel a wider space opening inside your own body. It is not the kind of silence that makes you feel empty or bored. It is a silence with weight, like stepping into a room where no one is speaking yet. Something important is happening. This stillness does not come to soothe you, it comes to awaken you. You recognize that immediately, because in the middle of your familiar rhythm, there is suddenly a segment you cannot skip. A very small moment when time contracts and you feel as if you are standing in the intersection between two versions, one old version still wanting to run toward noise, and a new version that only needs to stand still to hear what is trying to enter. This is the stillness the field uses to speak. Not through words, not through signs, but by removing all unnecessary sound, so you are forced to hear the only thing that matters. In that moment, you no longer find stillness frightening. You see it exactly as a reminder. It is time to stop and feel what is rising from within. You do not pause because life is calm. You pause because something inside you is moving so intensely that you cannot keep living as if nothing is happening. This stillness is like a doorway opening in the middle of your path. You do not expect it, but once you see it, you cannot pretend you did not. It makes you slow down, not to wait for something outside, but to listen to the vibration coming from your own center. This is the moment you truly understand that the quiet does not come to make you comfortable. It comes to measure how ready you are. Every time you enter this state, a very soft yet deep question appears. A question with no words, only a feeling. What is changing in me? When you dare to stay still long enough, the answer begins to reveal itself. You realize stillness is not a stopping point. It is a map. It points to the places within you that have been forgotten because life was too loud. It shows you the small fears still hiding in the corners. It shows you where you have been shrinking yourself so you would not disturb anyone. It shows you the exhaustion you used to call normal. You sit there doing nothing, yet inside you unfold layer after layer of truth you have avoided for many years. Something as simple as an inhale carries a different sensation, as if you are reclaiming the space that had been occupied by words that were not yours, expectations that did not belong to you, responsibilities beyond what your soul chose. Stillness becomes the way the field brings you back to center. When you are in the center of yourself, you are no longer easily pulled toward the noise outside. Things that once controlled you through fear suddenly become weaker. You see them more clearly, and that clarity sets you free. You begin to realize the things that drain you are not exhausting because they are difficult, but because they no longer belong to you. As long as you stay in that stillness long enough, every layer of pretending falls away without you having to force anything. This is the moment you step into a new frequency where energy is no longer leaked through small anxieties. You do not need to do anything, just hold your presence. When this presence strengthens, stillness becomes guidance. You know what you need to leave. You know what you need to step into. You know who truly aligns with your path. You know, the moment to close a door and the moment to open your heart, not through thought, but through a physical clarity in your body. Everything becomes precise, as if a new layer of awareness has just been activated. And the strangest part is this stillness follows you. It appears in the way you see things, the way you speak, the way you walk. Others feel you are changing, even though you say nothing. Your energy becomes the evidence. When you grow familiar with this stillness, you no longer fear the quiet spaces in life. You do not try to fill them with work, social media, or meaningless conversations. You begin to honor that space because you know that in every quiet gap, something is being rewritten. This is the stage where the deepest part of you begins to lead. Not loud, not rushed, not demanding. Only a certainty you feel clearly in your chest. Stillness becomes your new companion. It keeps you from being pulled into battles that are not yours. It keeps you standing on the path you are opening. It brings you back to your own essence without requiring any explanation. And once you reach this point, stillness is no longer a pause. It is a reminder. It is a signal. It is a doorway. If you are feeling a similar stillness in your life, leave a very short message under the video so I know you are in this part of your journey. Write, "I am listening." That alone is enough for the field to recognize you are ready for the next chapter. When the small signals begin to find you, you no longer need to hunt for them like you once did. You no longer watch the clock waiting for repeating numbers, no longer search for meaning in every coincidence, no longer ask whether something is a real sign or just imagination. What you feel now is not the same as before. It does not come from a need for confirmation. It comes from the clarity growing inside you. A signal does not appear to excite you. It appears to measure whether your frequency has become stable enough. When your frequency is stable, every sign begins to shift toward you in a very subtle way. A sentence you accidentally overhear in a cafe may make you pause because it touches exactly what you were just thinking. A message appears on your phone at the precise moment you stand before an important choice. An old friend suddenly reaches out at the exact time you need an answer no one knows you are searching for. These are no longer random. They do not try to impress. They are not loud. They feel like light footsteps passing by, but leaving a clear trail of energy across the air. You know you are not the one searching. You are the one being found. This difference marks the beginning of a new phase. When you stop chasing signals, the signals recalibrate to find you. They do not appear frequently, nor do they follow a pattern. They arrive through a feeling you cannot describe in words. It may be a moment when you sense something observing you from a very still, very deep layer, not in a supernatural way, but in the sense that your consciousness has become sensitive enough to hear the feedback of the field. Some signals pass so quickly that if you are not still enough, you will miss them. But when you do notice, you instantly know it is meant for you. You do not need to decode it, you just need to receive it. For example, when you are sitting in a car and suddenly feel a gentle movement in your chest, not pain, not tension, just a light shift that makes you pause your gaze and wonder what just touched you. Or when you look into the mirror and see that your eyes carry a different quality as if you are being seen by a higher version of yourself. Nothing changes in the reflection, but the sensation around you changes completely. These small signals share one thing. They only appear when you are no longer trying to control anything. They appear when you stand in a position where you can see your own truth without denying it. When something inside you has ripened, has become quiet enough, wide enough to receive, signals do not appear to lead you into a vague journey. They appear to confirm that the earlier slip in reality was not your imagination. You are not confused, you are not exaggerating, you are stepping out of your old layer. And when that happens, the world cannot keep its old shape anymore. Conversations begin to carry a different tone. People who once irritated you become easier to read. Situations that used to worry you become faint, not because life has changed, but because the way you touch life has changed. The field responds immediately with small signals to ensure you do not return to old uncertainty. Each signal is like a gentle tap on your shoulder, reminding you that you are moving in the right direction. You no longer need big reassurance. A tiny vibration is enough to tell you what is unfolding. The subtlety of these signs is the measure of your inner maturity. In the past, you needed bold signs, strong hits, impressive events to trust your path. But now, just a very small coincidence allows you to feel the layer beneath it. You can feel the connection between inner and outer thickening day by day. You can feel you are no longer walking alone. You may begin to notice something special. Signals do not only appear from the outside, they begin appearing from the impulses within you. There are days you do not understand why you want to leave a long-term relationship. There are mornings you wake up and know you cannot continue your old job for even one more day. There are urges so strong you cannot explain them with logic, but cannot deny them with intuition. This is the strongest signal. Inner signals always appear before outer signals. And when the two begin to align, you enter a phase where your choices are no longer based on fear. You begin to choose because you have changed. You begin to walk toward what truly belongs to you. The most important thing in this phase is not decoding every signal. The important thing is that you are clear enough to recognize that they are finding you because you are no longer running from your true self. When the small signals start appearing more frequently, you understand this is not a journey you are trying to chase. This is a journey moving toward you at the exact frequency you have just reached. And from here, every step you take will carry the presence of signals that only appear when your soul has arrived at the stage where it is ready to receive them. Energy memories reactivate in ordinary moments, precisely when you do not think anything special is happening. They do not open during deep meditation. They do not appear in mystical moments. They often rise right in the middle of the most normal scenes of life. Like when you are washing your hands under running water and suddenly feel that this is not the first time you have stood there. Not the familiarity of habit, but a familiarity coming from a very distant layer, as if you have lived this scene before in another reality. You stand still for a second, no one sees anything. Nothing looks unusual. But inside you, a field of energy has just moved intensely. That sensation is not a recall of memory. It is the response of the energy field. Your body remembers things your mind has long forgotten. This becomes clearest when you meet a stranger and yet feel as if you have known them before meeting them. You do not know their name, you do not know who they are, but a deep recognition rises, as if the energy between you and them met long ago in a layer where time does not exist. Their eyes make you pause because in that moment you are not looking at the person in front of you with your eyes, you are looking with frequency. Old memories do not appear as images, they appear as sensations. A sense that you have stood inside this connection before. A sense that, clearly you began a journey with this person at a point that does not belong to the physical timeline. Energy memories always return this way. Quiet, precise, and often when you are unguarded. You may be walking on a familiar sidewalk and suddenly feel a gentle wave moving from your spine to your chest. Not painful, not strange, but deeply meaningful. It feels like a thin current reopening a doorway that has been asleep. You do not know which lifetime or which moment the memory belongs to, but you know it belongs to you. It does not tell a story. It simply awakens awareness. When you become sensitive to these movements, you start to realize that some moments in life do not appear to unfold, they appear to activate. A casual sentence from someone can drop you into a deeper layer of awareness. A place you have walked by many times, but one day suddenly feels like the exact stretch of road where your soul once left a marker. A song you have never heard yet makes you feel both peaceful and nostalgic for something you cannot name. This is not nostalgia. This is energy memory. It comes to remind you of the parts of yourself you have dropped along the human journey. When energy memory rises, you begin to see clearly that none of your experiences are random. Every connection you create continues a long thread. Your soul has been weaving. Encounters that seem accidental are intersections mapped long ago in the unseen layer. When you begin to feel this, the way you see people changes completely. You no longer judge who is right or wrong. You see the vibrational essence beneath every action. You see who is in the same frequency with you. You see who appears to activate you. You see who comes to complete an old cycle. Others do not change. The way you read their energy changes. These memories do not detach you from life. They make you live more awake. When someone walks into your life and you feel your chest become still in a strange way, that is not fear. That is the resonance of old fragments of energy finding their way back. Many people call that intuition, but intuition is only the surface. What you are feeling is the memory layer of your soul telling you there is something you need to see, need to learn, need to reclaim. And then there are stronger moments when you suddenly remember a quality in yourself you thought you had lost. A courage that once burned in you, a sharpness that once guided you, a faith that once made you radiant. You reclaim these parts not through thought, but through a very physical sensation. Like a door in your chest swinging open and bringing you back to your own center. This is the most important part of energy memory. It awakens you to essence, not to story. It returns to you what you thought you had to search for, but in truth, only needed to remember. These memories do not come from the past, they come from the deepest layer of your being where every version of you that has ever existed is stored. Each time they surface, you become sharper, fuller, more anchored, not because you gain something new, but because you shed the layers that have clouded you for too long. When you begin to recognize energy memory in everyday moments, you no longer live by reflex, you live by awareness. You walk connected to what the eyes cannot see, but the body always feels. And from here, your transformation is no longer led by effort. It is led by remembering. When a person lives from remembering, they are no longer carried by life. They become the one who rewrites life according to the frequency they choose. You are entering that stage. And from this moment on, you will never touch life in the old way again. The unconscious opens when you stop pretending, and that moment always arrives in a very quiet way. There is no big event, no warning sound, no crisis forcing you to change. It happens when you are tired to the point you can no longer perform any role in your own life. You no longer have the energy to strain yourself, to appear fine, to maintain an image that keeps others comfortable. You no longer want to live inside the stories you have spent years using to convince yourself. When the last layer falls away, you do not become weaker. You become real. And that realness is the key that opens the door you have been searching for all this time. The unconscious does not listen to words. The unconscious listens to frequency. When you are still pretending that you are fine, that you are strong, that you can control everything, it stays silent. Not because it abandoned you, but because it knows you are not ready to face the deeper layers. But when you take a long breath and accept that something inside you is calling out, that there are fears you have tried to hide, that there are wounds you once treated as non-existent, at that moment, a clear shift begins. You feel a gentle slide from your abdomen to your chest, as if the space inside you has expanded just enough for truth to enter. The unconscious does not open to hurt you more. It opens so you can look at everything you once tried to cover with the eyes of someone who has grown enough to no longer run from themselves. When the unconscious opens, you begin to see clearly the things you have spent your whole life avoiding. You see the nameless fears you once disguised with reasonable explanations. You see emotions suppressed for so long that your body forgot how to release them. You see old memories that did not disappear like you thought. They were only pressed deep enough not to disturb you until you were strong enough to receive them again. This is the stage many mistake as regression, but it is actually an upgrade, because only when you face the deepest layer can every layer above reorganize into the right place. You may sit alone in your room and feel your throat tighten, even though nothing has happened. You may hear someone say something ordinary, but it touches a very deep point. You may look into your own eyes in the mirror and see a fatigue you once refused to acknowledge. And even in those moments, you no longer feel the old fear. Instead, there is relief, as if you have finally let go of something you have carried on your shoulders for too long. The unconscious opens not only to show you uncomfortable things, it opens to show you what you once forgot you had. It reminds you of your original strength that does not require tension. It returns to you the sensitivity you lost after living too long in a defensive state. It brings back the connection to your own intuition that you once denied because you feared it would lead you away from what was familiar. When the unconscious opens, you understand that every wound that broke you was a doorway into a deeper version of yourself. No pain is meaningless. No hurt is unnecessary. Everything is placed precisely to bring you to a moment where you are quiet enough to realize you were never as weak as you thought. What exhausts you is not the pain. What exhausts you is hiding the pain. And when the covering layer dissolves, the energy that has been blocked for years begins to flow again. This sensation is not an explosive release. It feels like reclaiming space inside your own body. A space you once gave away to old beliefs, to relationships that no longer fit, to pressures that never belonged to you. When that space returns, you stand straighter without effort. You speak more honestly without fear. You feel what you need without having to ask anyone. This is the moment your intuition becomes the main voice, not the faint echo buried beneath worry. And when intuition leads, every choice in your life is no longer based on habit or fear. They are based on alignment with your essence. You know what needs to end. You know what is opening. You no longer cling to old things just because they are familiar. You also do not chase new things just because they promise something. You stand in your natural flow where everything comes and goes according to a logic the mind cannot analyze but the heart recognizes instantly. This is the point where you begin to change for real, not because you try, but because you are no longer pretending. When the unconscious opens, you do not just heal, you restructure. You do not just understand yourself better. You become your true version without the weight of defense. And from here, your entire path shifts into a new layer, the layer of truth, of inner freedom, and of the ability to live a life no longer controlled by what you were once afraid to face. You have faced it. And when a person dares to look directly into their deepest layer, they never live in the old shell again. You begin to draw toward what resonates with you at the exact moment. You no longer try to prove anything. When you have gone through enough layers of inner shift, enough truths revealed, enough old frequencies falling out of your structure, you enter a state where your energy becomes clearer than any words you could say. People do not attract each other through personality or appearance, as many believe. People attract each other through frequency. When your frequency changes, every connection in your life changes with it. This shift happens quietly, but precisely. You will notice that people who once appeared regularly in your life begin to fade out. There is no conflict, no argument, just a soft dimming of connection like the late afternoon light. Not because they have become worse or you have become better, but because the two wave patterns no longer match. Just like two instruments playing the same song, but when one of them changes key, even standing side by side, the sound no longer harmonizes. Human energy operates the same way. When you change key, you change the entire world around you. This pull does not occur only in relationships. It happens in every detail of your life. An opportunity you once chased for months arrives the moment you stop clinging to it. A new path opens when fear no longer holds you by the throat. An offer appears when you no longer use your energy to fight yourself. You will see that when you align with your true essence, life responds instantly and never late. Connections feel as if they are arranged by an invisible hand, but that hand is not outside you. It is the deepest part of you, the part that always knew where it belongs, but you once heard too faintly to trust. When you change frequency, you do not only attract what you want, you attract what resonates with you. This is both a gift and a test, because you will meet people who carry the same sensitivity, the same depth, the same clarity. They make you feel as if you are seeing an upgraded version of yourself. But you will also meet those who reflect the parts you still need to heal, not to hurt you, but to bring you to the point where you can no longer deny yourself. Honesty is no longer a choice. It becomes your energetic environment, and in that environment, nothing can stay misaligned. You will notice there are conversations that expand you after only a few minutes, not because of the content, but because the energy of the other person opens the right doorway inside you. Conversely, some conversations make your body contract after only a few sentences, not because they are bad people, but because their frequency pulls you back to an old version you no longer fit. The body always announces what the mind has not seen yet. One of the clearest signs of this stage is that you begin to appear in spaces you once thought you did not belong to. You feel comfortable among people with a wider resonance. You feel natural entering environments that used to make you hesitate, not because you changed to fit them, but because you are now standing in the version that those spaces require. When you stand correctly, everything around you adjusts automatically. You draw in people who understand you without needing much explanation. You draw in deep conversations without trying to search for topics. You draw in aligned opportunities without effort. And you draw in the peace you once had to fight for. The most important part is that you no longer chase what no longer belongs to you. When something misaligned leaves your life, you feel a lightness in your chest. Not the lightness of avoidance, but the lightness of returning to your rightful place. You know, clearly when you are moving against your own frequency, and you cannot force yourself to ignore that truth, even if you try to justify it. And when something aligned appears, you never mistake it. Alignment feels very different from excitement. Excitement is loud. Alignment is quiet. Excitement scatters you. Alignment makes you clear. Excitement arrives fast and fades fast, but alignment grounds you without effort. When you begin to draw toward what resonates with you, you understand that life does not reward those who endure best. It rewards those who dare to return to their true frequency. You find yourself speaking less, but every word carries more accuracy, trying less, but every action carries more weight, searching less, but receiving more. When you enter this state, you no longer wander in circles. You walk straight, not because you know everything, but because you feel everything more clearly than ever. And from here, you begin to attract an entirely new reality, not through desire, but through the presence of who you are. This is the stage where the field no longer responds through testing. The field responds through collaboration. You send a signal, it answers. You choose a frequency, it opens the path. You become the transmitter, no longer the pursuer. And from this moment on, everything that matches your true nature will find you faster than you ever imagined. You do not have to reach for it. You just have to stand correctly. When you no longer live inside the story, but step outside of it, everything in your life begins to carry a completely different quality. Not because reality changes, but because your vantage point is no longer tied to the old role. You are no longer the one being swept into familiar conversations, emotional loops, instinctive reactions. You become the observer, the one who realizes you have repeated a pattern for years without noticing. It has shaped almost everything about the way you live. The moment you step outside, the story happens very naturally. You are speaking with someone and suddenly feel as if you are seeing them from farther away than usual. Not farther in distance, but farther in attachment. You see irritation forming in your body, but it no longer controls you. You sense fear trying to rise, but it no longer has enough authority to push you back into an old reaction. Instead of being pulled in, you stand outside and see yourself preparing to react. That is when you understand that you are no longer the character in the story. You are becoming the one who rewrites it. When you stand outside the story, you can feel clearly every signal of the body and every shift in consciousness. You know, when you are being triggered, when you are stepping into an old role, when you are tightening up to protect an image that no longer fits. And that sharp awareness is exactly what makes the old story unable to hold you anymore. What once shattered you now becomes only a small wave. What once threw you off balance now becomes only a soft tremor. What once made you rush to explain now makes you smile because you see the hidden layer underneath it. This is not emotional detachment. This is detachment from unconsciousness. When you no longer live inside the story, you no longer believe that every word is aimed at you, that every action of others reflects your worth. You begin to see that each person is living in their own story and reacting from wounds they do not yet understand. This does not make you superior, it makes you lighter. Light in how you see, light in how you respond, light in how you move through life. You no longer need to win an argument to feel safe. You no longer need someone to agree with you to feel right. You no longer need to perform strength to hide your tenderness. You only need to stand firm in your real energy, and that energy automatically recalibrates everything around you. When you step outside the story, you realize you no longer need to explain the depths within you to those who cannot hear at that frequency. You know that when you shift your field of awareness, those who are not in the same layer drift away without you needing to distance yourself. You only need to be honest with your new state, and that state itself filters what belongs and what does not. This is when you recognize the power of silence, not silence to endure, but silence to observe. You begin to see the space between reaction and action. In that space you see yourself, not the version shaped by wounds, but the version calmly placing a hand on your own destiny. When you stand outside the story, time also changes. Everything is no longer urgent. You no longer feel forced to make decisions immediately. You start to see details others cannot see. You recognize which choices come from fear, which choices come from true frequency. You recognize which path is open for you and which path you are choosing only because of invisible pressure. The mind no longer runs wild. It becomes a tool. The soul becomes the guide. And when the soul leads, every step feels steady like a slow and even drumbeat, not fast, not slow, not shaken. You begin to see that life is not a series of events you must survive. It is a subtle maze designed to reveal each layer of your own being. When you stand outside the story, you no longer fight the maze. You read it. You move through it with clarity that no challenge can break. And then you realize the most important truth. When you step outside the story, the old story loses its power to define your future. You no longer repeat the old patterns. You are no longer held by what once bound you. You begin to create a new reality from a place of awareness instead of defense. Everything begins to rearrange in the direction you always felt you belonged to, but never had enough clarity to enter. If you are feeling this shift of layers, even if only in a very subtle way, press like on this video to let yourself confirm that you have stepped out of the old unconscious zone. A light touch is enough for the field to recognize where you are in your journey. From here, the new story opens, not from where you are running, but from where you are standing true. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is the moment your energy returns to its natural trajectory after being pulled off course for too long. People often mistake holding on for strength and letting go for weakness, but deep inside you know that clinging is what drains you. When you let go, you do not lose anything. You simply return what no longer belongs to you. Real strength is not in gripping something until it crumbles in your hands. Strength is in the clarity to recognize when the current has shifted and you no longer belong to what once was the center of your life. There are phases when you feel as if you are standing in an old room where nothing is broken, but nothing carries your breath anymore. Relationships still exist, but no longer create a living rhythm. Old goals no longer make you wake up with light. You do not understand why you lose patience with what once mattered. You only know one thing: you have outgrown that room, and letting go is the only way to step into a new space. Letting go is not turning away. Letting go is an internal action where you tell yourself that you no longer need to use force to keep something in place. Everything in life has its own rhythm and its own equilibrium that does not follow personal preference. When you interfere, you create tension. When you let go, you return order to the field. People fear letting go because they think they will lose direction or fall into emptiness. But that emptiness is what heals. That emptiness is what allows you to hear your own voice again. That emptiness is what opens the doorway for what is trying to reach you but cannot enter while your hands are still clenched. Letting go is the state of energetic intelligence. You know, when something that was once right has completed its task, you know, when an old chapter is waiting to be closed so it can free space for the new one, when you let go, you stop feeding energy into what no longer nourishes you. You recover, you regenerate, you return to your natural rhythm. What is fascinating is that every time you let go is a time you see yourself more clearly. What you thought you wanted is sometimes only habit. What you clung to is sometimes only familiarity. When you let go, familiarity falls away like an old shell, and you stand with a version of yourself that is leaner, sharper, truer. When you let go, you no longer try to fix others, no longer try to change circumstances, no longer use force to create outcomes. You understand that everything has its own frequency and you only need to stay in your own layer. When you shift layers, things that do not belong fall away on their own, and things that match return to you. This is the operating law of the field. No forcing, no chasing, just keeping yourself aligned. Letting go also reveals a truth that makes you lighter. Not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Not every ending is a failure. Some departures are protection. Some endings are liberation. Some doors close not to punish you, but to keep you from walking into paths no longer aligned with who your soul has become. You once thought you would collapse if you lost a person or something important. But when you let go and time passes, you realize you not only survived, you became more yourself. Your frequency is brighter, your breath lighter, your inner world wider. Not because you are stronger than others, but because you stopped carrying what was never yours to hold. Letting go also teaches you to look at yourself with a level of honesty you had never reached. You start to see the places where you held on, not out of love, but out of fear, not out of alignment, but out of habit, not out of choice, but out of avoiding emptiness. When you see this truth, you no longer use the word losing, you call it what it is. This is returning to your natural state, the state where your energy flows unobstructed, where you do not defend yourself with old stories, where you do not perform strength to hide vulnerability, where you do not strain to prove you are enough. Nature does not force itself to become anything. Nature simply operates at its true frequency. When you let go, you do the same. You let yourself return to the original rhythm that life has buried under too much noise. And from that original rhythm, the truest choices appear. You see that you do not need to cling to anyone to be loved. You do not need to hold on to anything to feel safe. You do not need to chase to prove your worth. Everything meant for you will find you when you return to your true layer. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is returning. Returning energy, returning stories, returning attachments that no longer carry light. And when you return them, you regain the one thing you thought you had lost long ago, freedom within yourself. Letting go is one of the most delicate acts of awakening. It is not loud, not grand, not dramatic. It happens in a soft breath, yet powerful enough to shift the entire course of your life. And when you step into this natural state, you understand something very clearly. Letting go was never losing. Letting go is the moment you win against your own misalignment and return to the place your soul has been waiting for you to come back to for a very long time. When life becomes an honest mirror, you no longer see the world as a sequence of separate events. Every person you meet, every situation you touch, every emotion that rises carries a clear signal about your inner state. Life is no longer something that happens to you. It becomes a mirror so precise that at times you are startled by what it reflects back. What makes many people fear this truth is that they are not yet ready to face their true image. They want to see a perfect, strong, stable version of themselves, but the mirror of life does not reflect ambition. It reflects frequency. If inside you there is lack, you will meet people who make you feel insufficient. If inside you there is fear of abandonment, you will create situations where you are always the one being set aside. If inside you there is doubt about your worth, you will encounter cold eyes that seem to dismiss your existence. None of this is punishment. Life is simply showing you yourself. This may sound harsh, but it is deeply liberating. When you realize every reflection originates from within, you stop trying to change others. You stop chasing what is out of reach. You return to the only thing you can actually touch, your own frequency. The honest mirror appears most clearly in situations that make you uncomfortable. Activation never speaks about the other person. It always speaks about the hidden corner inside you that has not been acknowledged. When someone hurts you, the event pulls you back to an old wound you have not healed. When someone makes you angry, they touch the part you have been suppressing. When someone makes you insecure, they are simply reflecting the empty space within you that has not been filled. You do not need to like that reflection. You only need the courage to understand it. The truth is that people only play the roles that correspond to the frequency you emit. When you elevate yourself to a new layer, the old roles disappear automatically. The conversations you used to argue through no longer arise. The types of people who once harmed you no longer find you. The mirror changes the moment you change. No effort needed to fight. Just raise the frequency. When life reflects you accurately, you will realize you once tried too hard to fix the world, while the world was simply standing there, responding precisely to what you were sending out. This is why many people change slowly. They use force to control every situation. They try to manipulate circumstances. They try to make others understand and love them in the way they want. But reflection does not change through force. Reflection changes through truth. When you become honest with yourself, you understand the source of the distorted reflections. You realize you once created them from fear, from lack, from self-defense. You no longer blame anyone. You simply see the old energetic structure dissolving. From there, freedom begins. An honest reflection is also the greatest gift because it shows you where you are doing things right. When you begin to emit a stable frequency, you meet people who respect you without you having to ask for it. When you begin to emit clarity, bright choices appear like beams of light unfolding beneath your feet. When you begin to emit peace, life stops creating challenges that force you into defense. You receive exactly what you are, nothing more, nothing less. Many think they are stuck because of circumstances, but in truth they are stuck in their own reflection. They treat the reflection as reality and forget that the source is inside them. When you shift internally, the reflection changes so quickly you think life suddenly becomes kinder. But the truth is, life did not change. You changed. And life simply did its job: reflect. When you begin to see everything around you as a mirror, you no longer see others as problems. You see them as indicators. You see every situation as a map. You see events not as obstacles, but as information. The more you can read the mirror of life, the more power you hold within yourself. You are no longer carried by reaction, no longer pulled back by old stories, no longer trapped in emotional loops. You stand in the position of the observer who knows that anything appearing is a reminder for your evolution. This is when the mirror becomes a tool. You begin to use it to adjust yourself, not to judge yourself. You no longer blame or belittle yourself when an old reflection appears. You simply recognize it as a sign that an energetic layer is waiting for you to reshape it. When you know how to read the reflection, you no longer fear what comes your way. You no longer fear losing control. You understand that everything approaching you is bringing you closer to your clearer, brighter version. And the most beautiful part is that when you change from within, life does more than reflect. It opens. New possibilities appear. Pathways you never noticed suddenly reveal themselves. Opportunities once shut begin to open gently, like a door touched by the right force. Everything starts aligning with the new frequency you carry. An honest mirror may force you to face yourself in a way you never dared to before, but that honesty is the foundation of every deep transformation. When you have the courage to look into the mirror, you see something you once forgot. You are not held by life. You are holding life through the frequency you emit every day. The mirror never tries to deceive you. It is only answering you with absolute truth. When you understand this, you no longer fear life, you begin to collaborate with it. And in that very moment, you enter a layer of reality where everything you touch begins to speak in your true voice. When emotions become a compass instead of a burden, you begin to see a layer of life's operation that you once always overlooked. Emotions are no longer something you try to suppress, contain, or push through. They become subtle signals guiding you into choices aligned with your true nature. People often fear emotions because they do not understand their true role. They think emotions are disruptive, weakening, destabilizing. But the truth is, emotions only become heavy when you resist them. When you stop resisting, they become the sharpest compass you have. Emotions always arrive before thought. They respond to the deepest layer of you, even before you can explain what is happening. When you are sensitive to your emotions, you are sensitive to your own inner truth. And that is the biggest turning point of awakening. When emotions shift from burden to compass, you begin to see every small movement in your body as a map. A slight contraction in the chest tells you something is misaligned. A light feeling in the belly tells you are in coherence. A warm rush through your hand tells you you are about to say something that is not true to you. An emptiness in the stomach tells you you are about to step into a situation that is not yours. Humans have been conditioned to run from negative emotions and cling to positive ones, but by doing that, you only read half the map. Every emotion is data. No emotion is the enemy. Only information you have not yet learned how to read. When you begin to see emotions as signals, you no longer fear the heavy days. You understand that heaviness is a sign of frequency distortion, not personal failure. You no longer blame yourself for sadness. Sadness is a reminder that you are standing in the wrong place. You no longer feel ashamed of fear. Fear is a warning that you are about to enter a path that does not match your essence. You no longer run from anger. Anger is the signal that one of your boundaries is being crossed. When you can read these signals, life becomes clearer than ever. You are no longer led by unconscious reaction. You are led by your true internal information. When emotions become a compass, you begin to move with greater ease. You do not make decisions based on pressure or others' expectations. You make decisions based on how they resonate in your body. The body always knows before the mind. And emotion is the body's language. You may be standing between two identical choices, unsure of which to take. But if you place each choice into your body, you will feel the difference. One direction makes you contract, one direction makes you open. Most people ignore these signals because they are too used to living in their heads. But you are no longer in that layer. When you begin touching your own energy with honesty, even the smallest emotions become guidance more accurate than any advice. The interesting thing is that when emotions become a compass, you no longer depend on them either. You are not swept away by them like before. You observe them as a stream of signals passing through, delivering a message, then dissolving. You do not cling, you do not run, you do not exaggerate, you simply read. You no longer drown in emotional waves because you know you are not the wave. You are the one standing on the shore watching it move. From this position, you are not destabilized by intense emotions. You use them. Every strong emotion that appears is a sign you are near an important threshold of transformation. Waves of pain, fear, or disorientation no longer make you panic. They only signal that an old layer is cracking. And when the old layer cracks, you know a new one is opening. Many people spend their whole lives avoiding discomfort because they believe avoidance is protection. But avoidance keeps them stuck in the same loop with no exit. When you dare to face your hardest emotions, you step out of that loop. No longer trapped by old stories, you begin walking with clarity. You begin choosing what makes your body expand. You begin avoiding what makes you contract, not because emotions are weak, but because emotions are precise. When emotions become a compass, your relationships change. You no longer stay where you must shrink yourself. You no longer try to save connections that are misaligned from the root. You also no longer fear new connections because you are not guessing with your mind. You are reading with your senses. Your body will never be wrong. It only speaks truth. When you let it guide you, you enter relationships that truly belong to you without forcing anyone in. Your work changes too. You no longer pursue what drains you just to prove something. You choose what makes you light up. And that feeling of lighting up is the most accurate signal of alignment. When you live by the emotional compass, you no longer chase happiness as a goal. You live inside happiness as a state. Because you are always standing where you need to stand, life is no longer a battle between desire and duty. It becomes a journey where every emotion guides you deeper into your true self. And the most beautiful part is that when emotions are no longer a burden, you no longer carry yourself as a burden. You become light, you become clear, you become true. And from that truth, every decision you make carries the frequency of someone living in alignment with who they really are. The inner light is no longer a concept the moment you feel it operating as a real part of your energetic structure, not light in a romantic or symbolic sense, not something you hear in inspirational quotes, not something you try to imagine in your mind. This light is a very real, very specific expansion that happens in your body when a long-standing heaviness is lifted without you having to force anything. It is a movement you cannot create with willpower, yet you recognize it clearly when it appears. What makes the inner light feel most real is when you no longer believe it belongs only to special people. You begin to see that this light is not an achievement, it is essence. It is not a reward for being good. It is the core of every human being before they were covered by layers of defense, layers of old pain, layers of distorted beliefs they thought were themselves. When those layers begin to fall away, the light does not enter you. It reveals itself from the place it has always been. You do not become someone else. You simply return to the original state you were once too unsettled to feel. The inner light is no longer a concept when you feel a gentle warmth expanding from your chest to your shoulders for no reason. Not a surge of happiness, not excitement, but the sense that your body has opened a new space so you can breathe deeper than usual. You know it is not imagination. It is a subtle movement with real weight, like someone placed a hand on the center of your energy and brushed away a thin layer of dust that has covered you for years. When this light appears, you no longer need anyone to tell you to love yourself. You can feel your own warmth even without a reason to be joyful. You look at a stranger on the street and no longer react defensively. You see them as a moving field of energy rather than a threat. You sit in silence and no longer feel empty. You feel present, you feel enough, you feel full in a very quiet way. When the inner light becomes real, your inner voice changes too. It is no longer analytical, judgmental, or urgent, pushing you to decide quickly. It becomes deeper, steadier, simpler. You hear your own answer before the question finishes. You no longer need others to confirm anything, not because you are arrogant, but because the clarity inside you is bright enough that you can feel what is right through a very small shift in your chest. When the light becomes real, you realize you no longer need to force yourself to be kind or to hide your sensitivity. The original light does not come from trying to become a good person by someone else's standards. The light comes from no longer living under the layers of pretense that once made your soul shrink. You become softer but not weak, stronger but not rigid, clearer without needing to raise your voice. This is the kind of light others can feel before you speak. One of the clearest signs of the inner light is how you handle discomfort. Before, you hid, avoided, or reacted too strongly. Now you look directly. No defense, no self-blame, no exaggeration, just seeing, and that direct seeing makes darkness dissolve like mist under sunlight. You realize an important truth. Light does not defeat darkness. Light makes darkness lose its place to cling. When the light in you becomes real, you begin to change everything naturally. You no longer stay in places that require you to pretend. You no longer force yourself to love what has completed its task. You no longer continue a version of yourself that has expired. You automatically move toward people who expand your energy instead of contracting it. You choose paths that your body feels light on, even if the mind does not yet understand. You decline the things that make your chest tighten, even if logic has 100 reasons to keep them. Light does not make you perfect. It makes you true. And truth always shines. When the inner light becomes real, you see things you once avoided. You see the habit of shrinking yourself. You see the fear of being seen. You see the limiting beliefs you once protected as if they were truth. But instead of shame, you feel relief, because you finally understand that none of those things were your essence. They were only layers. The inner light has always been there, waiting for you to be quiet enough to notice. One of the most beautiful moments in this journey is when your light becomes so steady that others standing near you feel calmer. You do not need to say much. Your presence alone brings safety. Not the kind of safety based on strength that carries others, but the kind of safety that comes from someone who has returned fully to themselves. You become an anchor not because you strain, but because you shine. And this light is not something to display. It is something to live from. When the inner light is no longer a concept, you understand that it is not something to search for. It is something to return to. Not something you must learn to have. It is something once covered that is now being revealed. And when you live from this foundation of light, every movement in your life changes direction. You no longer search for the right path, you are the right path. You no longer search for clarity, you are clarity. You no longer search for peace, you are where peace originates. The inner light becomes real only when you dare to live without shrinking yourself to fit the old story. And from that moment on, the entire world begins to turn according to your true frequency. When you no longer seek a place to belong, you become the place to belong. This moment does not come when you have solved every question, nor when life becomes easy. It comes when you stop running from yourself. For a long time, you believed that to feel safe, you needed someone beside you, a community to accept you, a place to lean on. But the more you mature in awareness, the more you see that safety coming from the outside is temporary. The moment circumstances shift, that safety disappears. The moment someone leaves, you return to the starting point of feeling misplaced. Then at some point you look into your own experiences and realize something important. You have never truly belonged anywhere, not because you are different, but because you were using the wrong key. You kept trying to find a place to merge yourself into. But belonging has never come from merging into anything. Belonging comes from standing fully in the essence of who you are. When you stop searching, you begin to see clearly the moments you once called empty. The quiet evenings you used to fear become the space where you can hear your true voice. The moments when no one is beside you become the opportunity to look directly at what you truly want. You step into a quiet fullness. Not a fullness coming from success or from others giving you something, but a fullness coming from no longer dividing yourself to please anyone. When there is no fracture inside you, you do not need an external patch. From there, change begins to unfold naturally. You no longer try to enter groups that do not match you. You no longer hope someone will give you what they are incapable of giving. You no longer use others' acceptance as the measure of your worth. You stand firm in your own quiet, and that quiet becomes the foundation of every connection you build afterward. This is also when you recognize a profound truth. When you become the place you belong, the people who share your frequency naturally find you. They do not come because you pull them in. They come because the energy you emit has become clear and consistent. You no longer attract people who operate from lack. You attract people who operate from fullness. You no longer build relationships from fear of losing. You build from alignment. You no longer try to keep anyone. Whoever belongs to you will stay. Whoever does not will leave gently, without hurt, without heaviness, without blame. When you become the place to belong, you see something you once overlooked. You no longer need others to make you feel safe. You do not need anyone to confirm you are enough. You do not need anyone to tell you that you are worthy. You know it from within. And when the inside knows, the outside becomes only reflection. The interesting part is that when you enter this state, you do not become distant or cold. On the contrary, you become warmer, because you no longer love from fear of loss. You love from wholeness. You no longer help others from the need to be needed. You help from the overflow of your inner light. You no longer speak from the place of someone who needs to prove anything. You speak from a place with nothing to defend. Your presence becomes steady enough that people around you feel safe simply through your breath and the way you show up. You become the place to belong, not in a romantic or poetic sense, but in an energetic sense. A place where others can stand beside you and feel that they also have space to be themselves. Finally, when you no longer seek a place to belong, you understand that this journey was never about searching. It was about shedding the beliefs that made you smaller, shedding the expectations that pulled you away from your center, shedding the patterns you once thought were required, shedding the way you once viewed yourself through the lens of others. When everything that does not belong to you falls away, what remains is essence. And essence is always a place of belonging. Thank you for staying with me until these final lines. May your inner light continue to expand and guide you into even higher versions of yourself. See you in the next chapter of this journey, where you will not only find yourself, but also find the ones who share your frequency waiting for you ahead.